Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting again, with the third in our learning journey. And this particular topic this week is all about reference relationships. What is a reference relationship? Well, in the article, we started by saying that a reference relationship was basically anything that wasn't a containment relationship, which is a little bit of a sort of smart aleck response. But in a sense, that's how you can think of it. A containment relationship, as we saw in the two previous exercises, were all structural. They defined how things were organized into a parent and child hierarchy. And once the entity was created, the containment relationship was created automatically. So we never actually created in the data tab of our Oracle policy modeling, we never created a containment relationship. It just showed up. As you can see in this example, I have two entities, one called the person, one called the vehicle, and both of them have, by definition, containment relationships, telling me that from global to the person, there's one to many, and from global to the vehicle, there's also one to many. But what about when we need to create relationships that are not structural, that are business related, that are trying to inform some kind of concept or rule or logic that isn't structural? For example, if I have a car sharing company and I have multiple vehicles and multiple people, well, where do they go? Which person goes in which vehicle? There's nothing I can do structurally, because just because your name is Richard or your name is Janet doesn't mean you're going to go in this particular car. Or if there is such a rule, I'm going to have to write it, I'm going to have to describe it. But before I get into describing rules, I need to describe the fact that there can be a relationship between a person and a vehicle. Richard can be in vehicle number 1. Janet can be in vehicle number 2. So those reference relationships are all about what this particular video is all about. In the case of the person and the vehicle, we're going to create a reference relationship between the two, because we're going to have a car sharing system where people can get into vehicles. And I'm going to organize that in my project. The starting point for a reference relationship is to actually click the New Relationship button on the Data tab. So that's the big difference. Is I actually have to specifically go ahead and start the process by creating the relationship. This is not something that gets created for me. So in this case, I'm going to go and create a relationship between the person and the vehicle. I'm going to go ahead and click New Relationship. And because it's a reference relationship, it's not structural, I have to define exactly the text that is most meaningful to me. There's no default text, if you will. So I'm going to say the person's choice of vehicle. And it's going to be a relationship between the person, from the person to the vehicle. And can a person be in many vehicles? No, they can't. But can a vehicle have many people? Yes, it can. So between the two clickable zones here, you can move between one to one, one to many, and many to many. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now I'll debug and see what gives. And I'll switch to the Data tab, and I'll create 2 people, and I'll create 2 vehicles. And to save a little bit of time, we'll first of all demonstrate that when you select a person, you can see the person's choice of vehicle, and I can choose from the 2 vehicles. Let's make that a little more friendly. I'll import a set of data that I worked on earlier today. So I've loaded in 3 different people and 2 different vehicles. So now when I select Claude, I can go to Claude's choice of vehicle, and I can say I know which vehicle Claude wants. Claude wants to be in rideshare number 1. Emily wants to be in rideshare number 2. And Bernard also wants to be in rideshare number 2. So now we have our ability to select which vehicles and which people go together. When you select the other side of the relationship, the vehicle, at the moment you can only see the name of the vehicle. Here's a little pro tip for you. We'll be talking about this in much more detail later on, but if you go back to your reference relationship and insert the reverse relationship text, so the vehicle chosen by the person, and return to the debugger, you'll see on the other side of the relationship that you can now actually visualize that rideshare 1 was chosen by Claude and rideshare 2 was chosen by Emily and Bernard. So by building our reference relationship, we are now able to manually select for each person which vehicle they wish to ride in. So right now I've got nobody in rideshare 1 and everybody in rideshare 2. It's up to me, of course, to produce business logic or rules to say that this is too many people, we need to spread them out against between rideshare 1 and rideshare 2. That's not the subject of this chapter. We'll be talking about that in a later step of our learning journey. But we've now created a reference relationship which we can use to express our own type of relationship between these two entities. When you're working with this kind of relationship, the second thing that when you're working with this kind of reference relationship, the next thing that you'll have to concern yourself with is how are you going to gather that data? So typically that means you're going to have to go and build out necessary screens in your interview, if it is an interview that you're creating, in order to let the user select the people and the vehicles. So we'll enter 3 different screens. Enter people, enter vehicles, since I called them vehicles, and put the third one will be select people and vehicles. So we're going to enter some vehicles. So I'll go ahead and choose the vehicle for this screen, and we'll put in just the name of the vehicle. I don't think there's anything else. We'll go to the people, and we'll choose the people, and we'll choose the person's identifier. There's really nothing else. And in the select people and vehicles, we will see that we now have in the new input, we have the person's choice of vehicle. So we are able to choose the person's choice of vehicle. So we have different ways to display this. We could choose it as a drop down. We could choose it as a radio button list. We could choose it as a text box, text button, I beg your pardon. I'm going to choose it as a vehicle. And I'm going to go as a radio button. I'm going to go ahead and run that interview in the debugger. So you can see that I can enter the vehicles, I can enter the people, and then I get to this screen where I have selecting people and vehicles. By default, because I haven't entered any rules yet in my interview, it will not show that screen for me in the interview. You'll notice they're grayed out. So I'll need to temporarily at least say always show me this screen so I don't have to keep remembering to click on it. That's better. And you'll notice one of the side effects. It says select people and vehicles, the person's choice of vehicle, the person's choice of vehicle, the person's choice of vehicle, which is a bit of a pain in the neck. It's showing it 3 times because there are 3 people, but just dropping the relationship control onto the screen doesn't actually show me anything of any particular use. It says the person's choice of vehicle and then a vehicle. I could, for example, change this text so that I use the substitution of the person's name. Well, that would be a good start, because now I can see that I'm choosing the vehicle for Claude, or the vehicle for Emily, or the vehicle for Bernard. You got to admit that having the name here at least makes it very easy to understand. I could even go so far as to add an apostrophe. Why not? There we go. That looks a little bit better, yeah. Claude's choice of vehicle, Bernard's choice of vehicle, Emily's choice of vehicle. So when you're building a reference relationship and you're starting to display it in the interview, think about how you're going to display it and make sure that it's obvious to the people who are using your interview that they are selecting a particular person. In this case, they're selecting a particular vehicle. If we didn't modify this, it would be very hard for the end user to tell who was going in which vehicle. That just about wraps it up for today, and in the next installment of this learning journey, we'll be looking at how to create rules to define a little bit more detail about which people and which vehicles. I look forward to seeing you for that one.